Driving the global cannabis ecosystem. Join GPS on a journey through the global cannabis ecosystem. Explore key drivers and gain insight into the influences required to accelerate the integration of cannabis and hemp into mainstream industries. Learn how cannabis and hemp hold the potential to usher in a new era of global economic growth, which could save the planet too. Chief Operating Officer of Gateway Proven Strategies from the United States of America, Deanna Callahan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Deanna Callahan, and I represent Gateway Proven Strategies. We are a global consulting firm that focuses primarily on the cannabis and hemp industries. Our motto is navigating the global cannabis market, and our mission is to connect the dots of the global cannabis supply chain. A little bit about who we are. We're headquartered in Denver, Colorado, but we have offices all over the globe. And we've had the pleasure of advising dozens of countries on their cannabis and hemp policies, helping to create pilot programs for cannabis or hemp legalization. We also have several offices across the US. And have worked in almost every US state where there's any form of legal cannabis or hemp. Today, we're going to be talking about driving the global cannabis ecosystem and what the challenges are to accelerating the growth and adoption of cannabis and hemp into mainstream industry. When I was a kid in Texas growing up, cannabis was very illegal. Texas is one of the larger states in the US. And as many of you probably know, United States is a little bit split on the topic of legalization. Federally, cannabis is still considered illegal. But there are now, I think, with 5 more coming online, almost 42 states at this point that have some form of legal cannabis or hemp. So that is definitely the vast majority. Growing up in Texas, I loved the plant. I was drawn to it. I did a lot of botanical research and just found that this plant had so many healing properties. And it made me very enamored. I wanted to pursue it. I wanted to learn more. But because of the legal status, my horizons were kind of limited. Then I figured out as I got to my early 20s that cannabis was legal in California. I thought that was just incredible. And I made it my mission to move to Los Angeles, where I live now, to participate in the legal cannabis industry. And I'm so glad I did. Today, I consult in the industry, but I've had the pleasure of working in every single vertical of the supply chain here, from retail to backwards, from cultivation to manufacturing and distribution to retail. I've had the opportunity to kind of touch it all. And it's incredible because my horizons have grown, and I'm not thinking in the bubble of just a Texas girl anymore. Now I realize that, hey, cannabis is legal here in California. This actually led to another epiphany. Cannabis is legal in Canada and many other countries around the world, in Latin America and Africa, countries in the EU, Holland, and it really kind of tied together into a certain theme that we'll be touching on in this presentation. And that is think outside your bubble. Cannabis is global. We'll also be talking through what you can do to accelerate the adoption of cannabis into traditional industry segments. And when I say that, I mean mainstream industry. We'll get into it. First, I just want to talk about how we see the global cannabis ecosystem. At the very center of this ecosystem is the driver. It's the individual. That's you and me. When we go to the store and we make a decision to buy something, we're voting with our dollar. And if we see CBD as an option, or we see hemp oil as an option, or hemp textiles from amazing companies that are starting to get into that, then we're making a decision that benefits the industry. It drives it through demand. Then we have the innovators. We like to call them innovators. You'll see they all start with I's. So we've got a little wordplay here. The innovators are the plant touching companies, the farmers that grow it, the processors that create products from it, the distributors that take it to stores, to retail stores, and then the retailers that sell the products. It's also inclusive of ancillary bits and pieces, right? So the university students in the basement laboratory of their university, just plotting and working to put together IP for hemp plastics and things of that nature. Those are our innovators. They're kind of the backbone, really the vehicle that drives this ecosystem. Then we have the investors. That one's pretty self-explanatory, right? It's individuals and funds that are interested in placing their capital in cannabis companies. And that's great. We're so happy to have all these investors interested, but there's a lot of, for investors, it's easy to become a little bit skittish because, of course, there's been all these kind of bubbles and contractions in the industry because it's an emerging industry. And also some investors come to the table with expectations that stifle growth in companies. So if you are an investor and you're looking to get into cannabis, make sure that you consult with industry experts that can really help guide you and help you to supplement your knowledge of the industry. So you're making investments in the right innovators, and tailor your expectations. You want to grow with the company, and expecting a return in a year, maybe 18 months it's a lot of pressure on a very startup industry. So come with an open mind. But those investment dollars, they're the fuel. They fuel this ecosystem. The innovators need the investment dollars in order to build out infrastructure to put products on the shelves for the individuals to buy. Then there's the incumbents. The incumbents, we call them this because they are enterprises that hold a very influential position in the world economy. These are those really large organizations like Coca-Cola and Procter & Gamble and Pfizer. The moves they make create ripples throughout the world's economy. And it takes those incumbents getting on board to really start to get the wheel turning. Then there's the institutions. Institutions are government entities that create regulatory frameworks for cannabis and hemp. And we hope that those regulatory frameworks promote growth of the industry and don't stifle it. Once the institutions like the FDA here in the US are putting out regulations and regulatory frameworks and things of that nature, they're essentially paving the path. They are the road. They're paving the path for incumbents, those large enterprises, which are very risk adverse. It paves the way for them to open up their minds and add cannabis or really hemp-derived products to their product lines, and in many cases replace less sustainable options like cotton or petroleum-based products like plastics. So moving right along, those innovators, just kind of circling back, those plant-touching companies, They have the products, they have the IP, they've been working in this industry tirelessly to identify the best ways to create these products. And I say cannabis as an umbrella term. And when I say that, I'm talking about hemp for fiber, hemp for fuel, hemp for food, cannabis for medicine, and cannabis for recreational use. It all kind of falls under that umbrella. And these innovators are producing new genetics and IP for plastics and textiles and fuels, even creating animal feed that just is blowing farmers' minds at how much more effective it is in the higher protein contents. There's so much here for this plant. And innovators, they've been working to build this, but they need capital. They need a supply chain. And that's the funny thing is there really has never truly been a supply chain. There have been periods throughout history in different countries where bits and pieces of supply chains may have existed. But at this point, at this juncture, we are building and connecting the dots of the global cannabis supply chain where in many cases there never were any dots before. So building that supply chain infrastructure obviously depends on regulatory clarity. That's what innovators need in order to really overcome the challenges that they're facing. Unified regulatory approaches across the globe would be maybe a miracle, but it would be just what we need to really meet our potential. The investors, we kind of already touched on this. They've got capital and they've got network. In many cases, investors bring a wealth of knowledge from their business expertise. But when it comes to cannabis and, of course, hemp, there's a lot of nuances. And so reaching out to people who have been in the industry for many years, the Bob Hobens of the world, if you will, that's a huge opportunity to gain additional knowledge and expertise to supplement your due diligence process so that you really know you're making the right investment. Of course, investors want assurance and ROI as well, but again, tailoring those expectations and ensuring that you're not putting too much pressure on these young startup companies, but also supporting with advisement and network and being there for them, being a partner. That's what we need to help support the growth of sustainable companies for long term. And then, of course, incumbents, they've got consumer influence. If your favorite brand of toothpaste was Colgate and they came out with a CBD version, I mean, you're more likely to engage with that brand because it's familiar. So if these brands that already exist and these large enterprises start to push out new products that integrate cannabinoids or hemp fiber, then they're allowing the consumers to make that choice. And it's a much easier jump to a familiar brand. They also have, of course, capital, and this might be the biggest thing. They have very robust supply chains. So what about the needs? Incumbents need risk mitigation. I mean, they are looking at the cannabis and hemp industry, leaning over the edge of their seats and saying, wow, it is really cool what's going on down there. We'd love to play, but, our hands are tied until we have some regulatory clarity. Because, of course, they're not going to risk their huge enterprises on, cannabis unless they know that it's safe. So that's where the institutions come in. Rounding back to this, it takes government institutions to put out regulatory frameworks that don't hinder the growth of the industry, that are conscious of the limitations, that are conscious of the requirements. And it's important for these government entities to consult with people who have built this industry. So the innovators. But But institutions, they're governed by the people. So they need political support. And in most cases, political support comes from large corporations, at least in America. Probably most places around the world as well. And popular demand, of course. Their constituents have to really want it. It has to be voted in many cases. And then, of course, they need education to even understand what the potential is. So it kind of goes full circle, doesn't it? It's almost like a chicken before the egg kind of thing. The governments need to put in place regulatory policies that support the industry. They're not going to do that until they get a push from their constituents, the individuals, and from large incumbent enterprises. And the innovators want to build out and scale the IP that they've built and launch all these products, but they can't do that until they have enough funding from the investors and the demand from enterprise and the individuals. And investors, of course, they want to know that they're going to get a return on investment. So they're much more likely to invest in an innovator who has a big contract with a large enterprise or has connections into an existing supply chain. So with all that said, the individuals coming back here, that's you and I, we are the driver at the seat of the wheel of this ecosystem. So it's up to us to make choices every day that support the growth of the industry. All right, I'm going to open up for questions if anybody wants to chime in. No, it's a little odd with virtual, but I'm working to pull up the chat box. All right.
Oh, one moment, please.
Mm-hmm. And if there's no questions, I won't be mad.
Thank you so much for your time. We look forward to hearing more from you in our discussion panel tonight.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I mean, I'm very passionate about this plant and what it can do for our world. And that's why I'm looking so deeply into the cannabis ecosystem, because it is global and it has the potential not just to revolutionize this industry, but to revolutionize the world. I mean, there are social equity programs at the local level and economic empowerment programs that are amazing, but it's so much bigger than that. This could change the landscape for the global economy, bringing countries that are, maybe export or import dependent, bringing them online and really just changing the landscape of the global economy. So, and on top of that, it heals the planet.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Have a good night.